Hi folks, just going to make another video on polishing with a handheld power tools, specifically the variable speed sander, and show you some of the accessories that go with it and how I do it. First of all, we'll run through the basic equipment. To start with, a bench that's about above waist high, and a container with some soapy water in it for dipping and wetting your workpiece, your rock. And might as well start with the sander. Now, you have to use a variable speed sander. For example, this one goes from 1000 revs to 3000 revs. They have a speed dial on the back. Now, with mine it goes up to number 6, but I never ever get up. And with this equipment you never get that high. My work is done at number 1, the lower speed, number 1, and the second speed, number 2. I don't know what revs they are, but they're pretty low. The sander has a 14mm spindle on it. Now I can understand overseas that this might be an imperial size, but the fittings you buy for it usually come in imperial and metric. A lot of the gear is made in Asia and Taiwan and China, and they're usually all 14mm. Now, just a note on these sanders, this is an electric sander, but you can a water-fed sander or a wet sander has the water feed going into it, and there's no need for the bucket to dip. The head's different, and a water pipe comes in here, so just keep that in mind. They're pretty expensive to buy. The only reason I don't have a water-fed sander is for economy. These are probably a third of the price. Right, next we move on to the fittings. There's today's workpiece, a piece of amethyst to be polished up for a client on the flat face. Right, this is the very roughest grit, for want of other words. I get this from THK Diamond Tools. I think they're based in Taiwan, and his prices are very reasonable. It has a 14mm thread on it, which screws straight onto that 14mm spindle. Now, this is only used at the very lowest speed, the lowest you can go. They're very rough, they're very aggressive, and today we won't be using that. It's used, I can't really show you on this piece because there's no big saw dags. It's used if there's a big saw dag sticking up on one edge from when you cut it, or the surface is extremely rough and you need to flatten it out. When you're finished with this, there's a lot of scratches left in your workpiece. All it does is rough it down to a flattened shape, or if you go in a dome shape, We'll do a quick demonstration of the aggressive grinding attachment for the variable speed sander. As I said before, it has a 14mm thread in there and screws straight on the spindle. It's used very slowly and with water. So we'll see if we can find something slabs here. Yeah, this saw mark on here that's sticking up, if you can see it, is just a bit much for your rigid lap discs. Although they're not that expensive, you don't want to be using your grinding away at that, trying to get a big lump down when you can do it fast with this. So I'll demonstrate on that piece. Here's another piece we can demonstrate on. You can see the dag sticking up in the corner there. Just a bit much for your more gentle discs. So we'll have a go at these two. Simply screw that on. Firm. Select the lower speed. And you can see that's easily taken that dag off, ready for the next stage, which is your rigid flat lap disc to remove these major scratches. Next in line is the Velcro attachment for your grinding or sanding discs, or wet diamond discs that you fit on. These also come with the 14mm thread, which screws onto there. Although these can be purchased separate for, in Australian dollars, $8, maybe $10 or $12. You usually don't need to purchase them because they come as part of these sets. You usually get one of them with the set of diamond discs. The Velcro attachment, easy to use. Just place, center the disc on, push it on, and you never have any trouble with that. Next in the lineup is the hard diamond disc, the flat lap discs. These are aluminium rigid, not flexible. I buy these once again from THK Diamond Tools, only because I haven't been able to find them anywhere else. They may be available elsewhere on eBay, but I'm quite happy with where I get them from. And they, once again, just Velcro onto your backing discs. And these are used at a higher speed than the first one. These ones on number 2. Now I'll show you later, these are used for removing all your major scratches, and also for if you want to, slightly rounding off on the edges. It sort of rounding off will highlight your flat shine. You'll have a flat shine, but if it rounds off and catches the light around the edges, it really sets the whole polish off. But we'll show you the use of them later. Now, even though these start at a low grit and work their way right up to, I think it's about 3000 grit, I only use the first four: 60, 120, 240 and 320, and then I move on to the soft flexible discs, which is the next in our lineup. These are wet diamond polishing pads. They are diamond grit set in a sort of plastic material. It might be PVA, but I'm not certain of that. And these are flexible and will bend and curve in with minor fluctuations in your sanding. Once again, they just Velcro on. And firm push, and away you go. And we'll show you the use of them later. Now that's all the basic gear, apart from a set of hearing protection, because these are fairly noisy. The only other thing I use is a bench grinder with a metal polishing wheel on it for the final finish. This isn't critical, but it just gives the final polish a little bit more shine. This wheel is a stitched sisal, as I said before, designed for cutting metal back, but does a perfect job for putting the final polish on polished rocks. As I said before, not critical at this stage, but I like to use it. Right, now we'll step through polishing this piece and give you a general idea. Like I said before, we won't be using the roughest wheel today, because there's not really many dags that need to be flattened off on this piece, but you can imagine if there was. It's very similar to the following steps, just a slower speed. Now today we're going to start with the rigid flat lap discs. And what I like to do is just lay them out in the grit size, ascending, and as I use them I just move them over, and then I can keep up with that I haven't missed a grit sort of thing. That's just a little tip anyway. So we'll start with the lowest grit in this set, the 60 grit, and that will remove the major deep scratches that are in the workpiece. So we just fit that on. And we push it down, and we'll start. Alright, we're going to keep dipping the rock in the water to keep the rock wet and the disc wet. We're just going to work it in a circular motion, and also we're going to be rounding off the edges. What I do is work it probably about that long, and then I turn the rock. I work it about that long, I dip it, and I turn the rock. So we'll have a go. Now, I forgot to say before, this is a handy device. Stops you getting wet, an apron. So I'll whack it on. Now the next step is to dry the rock off and inspect it. This is always done in the early grits, the lower grits, to see that the major scratches are out. Now, I'm not sure if you can see that, but it's not too bad. It does need some more rounding off, so I won't put it on the video, but I'll repeat this process of getting the major scratches out. There is a few there, and I'll do some more rounding off. Make sure when you inspect it, you completely dried it. It doesn't take very long with rock; that dries up in a few minutes, and you get in a good light where you can you might be able to reflect it in the light and have a good look at the surface. Right, so I've worked it a bit more, and I've dried the rock, worked it a bit more on the lowest grit of the flat lap, the rigid disc, and I've dried it off. I've rounded it off some more, and I can see no major deep scratches in it. I can see a fine, very fine hair-like network of scratches. That's normal with the lowest grit, because as the grits get finer and finer, that'll remove that. As long as there's nothing really deep there, and I'm pretty happy with that. Now let's talk about something else. A workpiece that is shaped like this is going to take a lot of personal choice in how much you round it off. From the back you can see that it's a very jagged piece. The rounding off I've done, you may think is a bit harsh, but it's only because I know from experience with this type of rock that it's going to be not too bad. Also, the slight curves on the edges makes your polishing job a lot easier. It gives you a smaller flat area, so that you can work when you get to the soft discs. You can sort of work them over, and you're going to cover any deep scratches that you may have missed. All right, we'll move on to the next grit in the hard, rigid flat lap discs. So now we'll move on from 60, which is the lowest in this the rigid set, onto 120. I'll just throw in another tip here. It pays to just just wet your disc first with some water before you start, and when you see me start grinding, I'll show you how I do that. won't turn the grinder on, I'll just show you something. When you're rounding off, you might have seen me in the video, I've got a little bit of experience. I swing it over to get the edges. I'm off of the workpiece in the middle and just catching the edges like that. And then when I get to the other side, I tip it up that way so that I catch that edge there. Then I turn it, a quarter of a turn, wet it, and I repeat it. If you use that method, as you're swinging, whatever you do, don't dig in that edge there into the rock. You'll put a deep scratch in it. Make sure you're swinging over, you're tilting at the same time. See how it's up in the air there? Perhaps to begin with, if you're inexperienced, just simply do the edge like that, turn it, wet it, do another quarter edge, wet it, turn it, do another quarter edge. It's a lot safer, but it's up to you. Right, there's no need to dry it off. Usually after you finish the basic grits, we've moved on in grits, but you can, to reassure yourself. I am going to, but after this grit there's definitely no need to dry it off. So that's dried off, it's looking good, it's going fine. Just a sidebar here, don't know if I'm in line with the video properly. There's a tiny piece of gem quality amethyst lodged in there amongst the rough stuff. So we'll move up in grits from the 120 to the finer grit of 240. Now as your grits get higher, it's a little bit lesser and lesser sanding you have to do of the item. The rougher grits you work longer than, and as the grits get finer we work them just a bit shorter. It's just the physics of it. So we'll proceed from 240 onto the finer grit of 320. I won't put this on the video. So we finish with the hard flat lap discs now. If you take up this polishing technique, you might decide to go further up in grits. I've tried it, I wasn't real successful. This seems to work the best. Now we're going to jump back down to a low grit again, but in a soft flexible disc. These are, as I mentioned before, wet diamond polishing pads. So we'll start on the lowest grit, 50, and we'll work our way all up through the grits to 10,000. So far the job is looking good. I haven't dried it off and it feels good. It's feeling more and more silky, for want of better words. Something I neglected to mention before, this backing pad and all the fittings are 100mm or 4 inches in imperial measurement. You can get various sets. They start at 2 inch, 3 inch, 4 inch, right up to 7 inch, but I found the 4 inch or 100mm is the ideal for flexibility on larger rocks, and also suits, they're not too big for smaller rocks, even as small as your thumb. So that's just another tip for you. And also 100mm or 4 inch are the most common available on the market for sale. both the fittings and the backing pads. And we're going to move on to the lowest grit, which is a 50 in the flexible discs, wet diamond polishing discs. The procedures are exactly the same. We just pick a spot, like I pick the flat spot, I hold it the right way up. That's my first side. Just give it a sand, do the edges, wet it and turn it. Sand, wet it and turn it. And you might do that for in the lower grit, you'd do that for 7 or 8 rotations, and as you worked up to the high grit, you might only do four turns of the rock. Now, as you did with the rigid flat tap discs, now we're on the soft flexible discs, and the lowest grit, make sure and dry it off and inspect it. Only in the lowest grit. Now I can see straight away it's going to need a fair bit more work on the lowest grit than I'm on, the 50 grit. The grinding I just demonstrated then, I'm probably going to need 2 or 3 times that amount again, and then I'll inspect it again, and then as I proceed in the higher grits, the other discs, it'll be less and less. So I had another go at the lowest grit, the 50 grit. Now I rotated and polished 16 times, and I'm pretty happy now. There's only very fine network of scratches which will be removed by the following higher grits as we work through them. Now don't forget, if you dry off, inspect and find that you need to go back to your bottom grit, do an equal amount on the edges because it's the same material. All these rocks are different. Out here in this yard there might be 100 different type of rocks, probably more, and they're all different. There's no hard, fast set of rules for all rocks. They're all different. The best thing you can do is dry and inspect. If you have any doubts, dry and inspect. Okay, we'll move up through the grits. That won't be on the video. We'll come back when I get a couple grits from the end because it's all the same technique. So we've just finished our 10,000 grit in the soft diamond polishing pads. Lay them out to dry before you pack them away the next day. The amethyst has come up pretty good. Can't really show you the polish with a video. Might catch it in the light somewhere. And there's the polish, and I'll just touch that up on the bench grinder with the stitch sisal wheel. Apply, if you do go the stitch sisal grinding wheel, apply a moderate pressure, pretty firm, and keep buffing it until the rock feels warm in your hand. The warmer the rock gets, the better that the stitch sisal can work. Although I can't do it while I'm videoing, turn it a quarter of a turn every time, and don't forget them rounded off edges, just swing over on every pass of the rock tray. This rock isn't that warm yet, so I'll keep buffing it until it feels warm in the hand that I'm holding it in. And check it now and again for the polish. Yes. Pretty happy with it, it's coming up very nice. That, folks, is the finished product. Very nice display piece. Now I started that at midday, 12 o'clock, and it's 2:20 p.m. now, so that's 2 hours and 20 minutes, but I also managed to make a video as I was doing it. Alright, thanks for watching.